Hello, and welcome to the lore of Braunhaven. A little bit of a switch up from the plan. Originally, I was planning to talk about the Duergar today and continue our discussion on the dwarves, but I made a slight mistake in the section that I was talking about the elves. We skipped over the Drow. And you can't really talk about the Duergar, or for that matter, a lot of the mythic underworld races, without first talking about the Drow. And so today's episode will be about the Dark Elves, otherwise known as the Drow. And so the Drow, at one time, this was shortly after the period when the elves were first created. Now, of course, the god myths show that elves were created right here on the prime plane, and that's not necessarily true, or perhaps it is a conglomeration of both truth and myth. But for the most part, we know that elves have a very strong tie, of course, to the Fey realm, and in the Fey realm, of course, you have the Phase elves. Now, and pretty much all elves are descended from the Phase elf, with their dual natures. The Drow are a subrace of elves that, of course, live subterranean, down in the underworld. In the Fey realm, they are known to live in mountains and caves. Perhaps in the Fey realm, they may not live quite as deeply as they do in the Prime Plane. They seem to go really down into the depths of the Prime Plane. But shortly after elves were first created, the Drow in the underworld created a vast subterranean empire that really spread across most of the Glaucian Empire and up into Stagina. Perhaps even slightly further to the east past the Grey Hills. And they had this pretty solid empire. And that almost immediately came crashing down when the cult of Arachnia started to take hold. Now, the cult of Arachnia actually started to take hold at first in the Fey realm itself. Those elves, it was successfully beaten back in the Fey realm. Those elves were kept at bay and were pretty much exiled to the Prime Plane. They were kicked out of the entire plane of the Fey realm to the Prime Plane, and unfortunately, that's how they came to infest. I mean, infestation is really the only real accurate word of what this cult does. So Arachnia is a demon goddess that is essentially worshipped by the Drow as a goddess. She would be considered a demon lord. In reality, more like a demonic entity. But she is worshipped as a goddess by the Drow. And the cult of Arachnia quickly started to spread. And by the time that the Drow Empire had attempted to stamp it out, it was already too late. They had just infiltrated pretty much every aspect. And one of the first things that the cult of Arachnia does, because she is a demonic entity, is she demands sacrifice. And this sacrifice started with the Drow people themselves. And as it grew, Arachnia demanded more and more sacrifice, and there were less and less Drow because she was having large swaths of the population killed off. And so, in order to meet her sacrificial needs, the Drow expanded, and they ended up the empire ended up taking over the Duergar and enslaving most of them. Much of the large stone and crystal cities of the empire of this period were actually created by Duergar because they knew the mining techniques. Um, they were beautiful cities, but the Duergar at that point the Duergar refer themselves that at one point they were a vassal state of the Drow Empire, but in reality there's no other way to say it, they were just slaves. And many of those slaves, their outcome was to be sacrificed. The same story is mostly true for Sverfneblin, but Sverfneblin, they were actually enslaved by the Mind Lashers, and the Mind Lashers, because of the constant mind control that the Mind Lashers had put on the Sverfneblin, the Grey Gnomes ended up being slightly unhinged and slightly crazy because of that. They say that you never meet a sane Sverfneblin. And so so this Drow Empire had taken over and kind of was in control of the Duergar. Um, and they were sacrificing them left and right. Meanwhile, Arachnia's presence had the cult had grown to be the power base of the empire, and so it always a city or town is always based around a temple of Arachnia, or at the very least a shrine. And it is, if it's a city, there will be a high priestess known as the Queen Mother, and attending to her are a number of priests and lower priestesses. The males can never gain any true power. They are never the one in charge. They are never. There's no such thing as a king father in the priesthood. It is always a queen mother. And any male that tries to gain power, or if he displeases one of the priestesses, he's most likely going to be put through a ritual where he is turned into an Arakeen. Arakeen are driders. It would be the typical half upper body half of a drow male, and the lower body of a spider. And they are basically just dumb brutes at that point. Any intelligence that the drow male may have had at that point is, for the most part, eradicated. He barely speaks in much more than grunts, and they are just used as shock troops by the priesthood. And so, uh, a lot of now there were a lot of Drow that fought against this worship of Arachnia, and it kind of fractured the empire, and so you have a lot of these Drow that have run away. Now, among those Drow, they worship Sinaz as typical of the father of elf kind, and they have small communities throughout the underworld as well. Most of this worship of Arachnia, what it ultimately led to, is the Drow Empire collapsing in on itself. It was not tenable, and there was an uprising with the Duergar, and that kind of ruined things. The Duergar really kind of whooped their ass because they really the Drow waited, until they had collapsed in on themselves so much. The Duergar were able to just kind of steamroll them, and so a lot of the Drow cities are now nothing more than spider-infested ruins, and nobody wants to go in there because there are Arakeen, there are spiders. They are typically just absolutely terrible places. And so um, that is the current state of the Drow Empire in the underworld. And like I said, that directly affects how the Duergar have formed. Next time we will talk about the Duergar themselves, and I hope to see you. And I hope everybody who is watching this has a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you for watching.